right, guys, moving on to Texas for us.
This week on The Beat, it's time to put it together.
I want to see them play their best game against Texas. I mean, simply stated, we have not played our best game. We have not put a complete game together.
Coming up, Mike Griffith shares his thoughts on how this cat is playing and what our boots on the ground picked up on the UGA secondary. Let's roll.
Giving you the insider takes and the big picture view on the Dogs. This is On the Beat with DawgNation insider Mike Griffith and Cody Chaffins.
I guess this week we have to say howdy, Mike. You got your hat and your bolo tie and your boots all ready for this week?
You know, I really have never been one for the cowboy look, and this week, Cody, it's not going to be any different. I'm not doing anything different for Texas. I'm going there to cover a football game, man. I'm not going there to pretend to be a cowboy or try to fake it for you. All can do that fun stuff, the fans, and I'm sure there'll be all sorts of people celebrating the Texas culture. I just want to see Georgia play their best football game, like Kirby Smart said, Cody.
Is that too much to ask, right?
I don't think that's too.
You're telling me you never, after Urban Cowboy came out, you never thought about, hey, maybe I need to get into that look like John Travolta.
I like John Travolta. No, no. That was a good movie. For those of you who haven't seen Urban Cowboy, it is a classic. I'm with you on that, Cody. And but no, I've never gone for the cowboy look or the cowboy boots. It ain't my style, man. I can't pull it off.
What you can do is talk dogs, and we're going to do that right here. It's Georgia-Texas week, biggest game in the nation this week. And if we're going to talk about this game, Georgia, it all starts at quarterback with Georgia. And in the offseason, we heard the quote that Kirby Smart gave to ESPN. We've played with it so much. He told him, we just got to let the cat go play. Talking about Carson Beck, the Georgia quarterback. First 3 weeks of the season, we acknowledged the cat wasn't out there just letting it loose and playing. He only averaged 226 yards throwing per game those games. But the last three, boy, he's turned it on. 379 yards per game. Is the cat playing like he should be, Mike?
Well, I think the cat's out of the bag that Georgia needs more offense for sure. And I think the way to do that is to go vertical. And you saw earlier in the year, Mike Bobo and Carson were, content with the checkdowns and the controlled offense. At that point, I think Kirby still felt like he had a defense he could play to. But, as he told DJ Shockley after the game last week on the Georgia Radio Network, if the other team's going to make explosive plays, and they are, then Georgia needs to be explosive. I think Kirby's figured out the identity of this team, and it's not prototypical by any sense of that word. It's a little bit different, and it's a growing pain when you lose three guys in the NFL draft that are picked in the top 100. And, I don't believe you got any real portal help in the secondary. Some other areas were addressed. But, this Georgia team is going to have to get some shootouts, and that's going to start Saturday night in Austin, Texas, against the number 1 ranked Longhorns. And what a lot of people said, Cody, before the year was the game of the year, and it still might be. Now, that's saying a lot because we've seen a lot of great football. Certainly, we've seen a lot of parity in the SEC. It looks a lot more like NFL scores these days, and really not being able to pick games that well or that accurately. This game, I believe anything could happen. I know that Texas looked outstanding against Oklahoma, but as we talked about earlier this year, that's an emotional bucket game for Texas. They had a lot riding on that. They played their best game of the year. Can they play back-to-back best games of the year? And Georgia, on the other hand, in a rare position is an underdog, and I like this. Last time I said I liked the intangibles was going into Tuscaloosa. That didn't work out too well. I'm going to pretend like that was a bit of an outlier. I think this Georgia football team is going to be ready, and I think that Kirby Smart has these guys loaded for bear.
All right, if we're talking about the quarterback, Carson Beck did something on Saturday, 459 yards. Aaron Murray never did that. Matthew Stafford never did that. Stetson Bennett, even your boy JT Daniels, never put up 450. I got to go all the way back to Eric Zier. So he's starting to hit on the deep balls more. We saw the on-the-move throw to Dylan Bell in the back of the end zone. Great catch. Hit Arian Smith for some longer ones. Why do you think it is Carson is starting to hit those more than he was? Is it just the play calling that's different, or is he growing into the season?
I think he's taking some shots. I think, he's got to trust his receivers and air it out. At this point, he's got nothing to lose. It's been a slow start to the season. The one thing Arian Smith can do is run fast. I think he catches, 4 out of 5 of those passes, and that's a pretty good ratio. And I look for Anthony Evans to continue to emerge. I know London Humphreys had a drop, but he's another player we're going to continue to see more of as Georgia has to go downfield more often. They're just not getting the yards after the catch with some of these receivers. I still think you got Lovett. I think he's a crafty little tough receiver that's going to get you those third down catches. We've seen Lawson Luckie emerge, and he's done some nice things at tight ends, but it is definitely time for the Dogs to go vertical, and I think Carson is ready to air it out.
And now, going along with that, and we said it on this show a few weeks ago, if you're going to let it out, you're going to throw more interceptions. He's thrown 5 interceptions through a couple against Mississippi State last week. Now, the other thing about Carson Beck is in this kind of big game, this kind of atmosphere, this is something still we haven't seen from him yet. You talk about the Alabama game, first half, 8 for 17, 2 interceptions, a safety. Go back to the other big stage he's played on, the SEC championship game, also against Alabama, but only threw for 91 yards in the first half of that game. Does it worry you at all that he has not proven it on the big stage yet?
Well, and you could throw the Clemson first half in there as well, Cody. But worry's not the right word. I think this is a very deliberate offense. I think it's a very intentional offense. And I think, again, when Georgia knows that there's a talent disparity and they can wear these teams down, I think they've been comfortable being patient. But when you go up against Texas, a team with a lot of firepower, it's a different kind of game, and Kirby knows that. It's going to be a very aggressive game plan, and I think they trotted that out there against Mississippi State. And the results were good in the first half against a pretty decent Mississippi State team. I know that sounds crazy to say they might be the best 1-5 team in the nation, but I think they're the best 1-5 team in the nation. They're not too bad. That was a Mississippi State team that held Texas to 14 points until the final play of the third quarter in Austin. So let's not give up the ghost quite yet. I think Kirby's got a few tricks up his sleeve. I think there's some things that Georgia hasn't put out there yet. Thought it was very interesting that they chose Trevor Etienne to speak to the media today and represent the offense. I think Etienne is ready to go off.
All right, we'll see about that. All right, let's go to the other side of the ball, or the other team, rather. Quinn Ewers, their cat. All right, so he missed the Mississippi State game that you mentioned, but came back last week, 199 yards, had a touchdown, did throw an early interception, looked shaky maybe in the first quarter of that game. How do you break down this quarterback matchup? What do you like out of Quinn Ewers?
Well, Ewers is a talented guy, and I've seen him pitch a perfect game before when he beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa last year against Nick Saban. He made some outstanding throws. He was on target. I'm not convinced that their receiving core is as good as last year's receiving core. I'm not convinced their running backs are as good. I think their offensive line is better. I think Quinn Ewers is fragile, and I think Georgia's going to throw some pressure packages on him that he hasn't seen yet. And if you're going to attack and take chances, which I think Georgia knows they need to do to get Ewers off platform, you are going to give up some explosives, but you trade that, Cody. You trade that for the opportunity to hit the quarterback. What's the old saying? The quarterback must go down. I think Ewers is fragile. I know that Texas has had problems keeping him healthy. We know all about oblique injuries. JT Daniels played through one very difficult injury, and he did not look good in the first quarter against A&M. If I were Texas, I would be concerned with Quinn Ewers and the ability to keep him clean against what I expect will be a very aggressive Georgia defensive front, particularly if they're able to ring the bell for Mykel Williams and get him to show up again. They've put him on the field for limited snaps, but he has not been effective. He does not look like a first-round pick. He does not look like the preseason All-American we all expected. This is an opportunity for Georgia's star players, Beck, Mykel Williams, Malachi Starks, to validate themselves after what I think has been a disappointing first half of the season for those three players.
Yeah, those are the guys they picked to go to SEC Media Days, and we haven't seen much. Georgia, no sacks on Saturday. And Kirby Smart in the press conference today talked about that a little bit, said maybe they were keeping it vanilla, not rushing maybe some of the guys they have. But how much of a worry is that they can't get pressure on the quarterback this year? And Mykel, of course, coming back from injury.
Well, the worry is that they're not attempting to bring in extra defender and they're still giving up big plays. Typically, that's been the trade-off, that Georgia's a team that does not give up explosives, certainly not major explosives, 20, 30 yards here, but not 70, 75. That's not Georgia, Cody. I haven't run the numbers, but I'll bet you they've given up more plays longer than 70 yards than they have the previous 5 seasons combined. So I think you're going to see that addressed and fixed. But I do think Georgia's going to gamble more. I expect this to be a high-scoring shootout kind of game. I know Kirby has to say that through gritted teeth, but he's gone up against Sark offenses before, and they've lit him up. So I think he knows what to expect with the current rules, the way they are. Don't know who the referees and officials are going to be yet. How this game is called on the perimeter will have a lot to do with how much contact is allowed, how many flags we see or don't see. So I think once Kirby settles in and figures that out, and I do expect him to have more fingerprints on this game plan. I don't think Glenn Schumann's had a good year. I know everybody was talking about Schumann being the next coach here or there, but the fact of the matter is, I don't think he's called a good season. I know this last game we saw Kirby running up the sideline and, bumped into a Mississippi State player inadvertently trying to get to Schumann. Schumann's lucky that Kirby didn't shove him because I don't think he's had a good year. I want to see more Travaris Robinson impact on this defense. I want to see more hitting. I want to see more aggression. And I think that's what they're going to need if they're going to upset the Texas Longhorns on Saturday night.
Interesting. You think Kirby he'll throw himself in there a little bit. That's really interesting. The defense for Texas also really good. Number one scoring and total defense team in the nation. So here's the big question. How do the Dogs get it done in Austin? Going to be an underdog for the first time in a long time. I'm sure Kirby's eating that up a little bit, feeding that out to his players this week. But how do the Dogs get it done?
Take some shots early, stretch them out, stay ahead of the chains, keep them off balance, some aggressive play calling. I think this is where Mike Bobo, we talk about letting Carson go play. I think it's time for Mike Bobo to let what hair he has down. I do think that the head coach has had some impact on the offensive game plans, but I think this is the game where Bobo earns his paycheck.
All right, we'll see if they can get it done. We're going to talk more about the secondary and our boots on the ground segment. We'll talk about the offensive line as well. That's coming up in just a minute. But before we do, we had a special guest in the house at the Georgia press conference today. It was Mark Richt as he was introducing what we told you about last week on the show, the Chick-fil-A Dog Bowl 2024. It's back for another year. It's an event we hosted right here on Dog Nation a year ago as Coach Richt is trying to raise money for the Isaacson Center at the University of Georgia, which of course is helping to fund research which is fighting Crohn's and Parkinson's disease, which Coach Richt is suffering from as well. We heard from the legend, Coach Mark Richt, at the press conference today. Here's what he said.
I wanted to announce the second annual Chick-fil-A Dog Bowl 2024, and we have the moniker of taking a bite out of Parkinson's and Crohn's. We are fighting those two diseases, and of course I've got Parkinson's, and Jaden actually has Crohn's disease. You'd never know. But she is struggling with that as well. So we're just trying to take a bite out of those two diseases. And as it turns out, the Isaacson Center for Neurological Disease takes a bite out of Parkinson's for sure. But there's a connection with the gut biology in the brain, which also helps learn things about Crohn's disease. So that's how those two are tied together.
So, of course, Coach Richt is fighting Parkinson's. He was talking about Jaden, his granddaughter, who was also in the house today, who's fighting Crohn's. This is an event that's closed to the public, but we are raising money, and we are, Dog Nation, are bringing you into the event. We are broadcasting the event that is going to feature Georgia players, current and former. Last year, they actually got about $750,000 in donations. They're looking to go over $800,000 in donations this year. We'll see if they can do it. Looking to have 14,000 donors. What a great cause and what a great night, Mike.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm very proud of our association with Coach Richt in this event. It's for such a great cause. And, when he called Dog Nation up and said, hey, you're our first call. We want your team to broadcast this. And, of course, Brandon Adams did a great job with it. And we know how much Jay Black does behind the scenes and how long he's been working with Georgia. Very fortunate to have him involved in that production element. So excited to see the Dog Nation team at work for a good cause and teammates with Coach Mark Richt and handpicked by Coach Richt. I think he did a pretty good job recruiting, and I'd like to think that we're going to continue to do a very good job supporting him. I think that broadcast, it starts at 6 p.m. that night, October 23rd. I know a lot of dog fans are going to want to tune in and watch these dogs bowl. They're going to be competing for a belt, and they take it very seriously. Warren Brinson was flashing that belt all over the alley last year when he was a part of the winning team. So Kirby said the players really enjoyed it. I thought this was a very positive event for the team, almost a team building event. They really enjoyed competing against one another, and they certainly do know how to put on a show.
Here's what Kirby had to say.
Guys, we did this last year, and our players absolutely loved it. I appreciate Coach Richt first asking us to do it and join in our off week, but our players love to bowl more than anything. We got several guys that bowl weekly. So I got to go last year. I got to be there. I bowled one time one time, and it was a strike. I am not bowling again. I've never bowled a game completely in my life. I'm not going to bowl this year, but I will be there and support, and I don't want to mess up my record on that deal. So, but our players did love it now, and it's a great cause. I didn't realize the turnout we were going to have. It was huge, and obviously for a great cause.
All right, so if you want to donate, you go to ricksdogbowl.com. That's Rick, like Coach Rick's last name with an S, ricksdogbowl.com. You can make donations there now. Go ahead and make your donation now, and then just enjoy the broadcast on October 23rd at 6 o'clock on DawgNation. You can watch it at DawgNation.com or our YouTube channel. Wherever you're watching On the Beat or listening to On the Beat, you can find it all of those places. And let's get on board and help Coach Rick. When he puts out the call, that's a person you want to support.
No doubt. Coach Rick knows how to call the Dogs, and DawgNation responded last year. And, I know Kirby Smart, he responded. Again, you saw Josh Brooks out there. You saw David Pollack. A lot of former players. I believe David Green will be out there as well. And I'm really looking forward to the broadcast. Again, it's for such a good cause, and the team has so much fun with it. It's just so much fun to see these Georgia players, being able to cut up and do something that they enjoy for a good cause. And you saw Coach Rick there, and want to give him a shout out, Cody. He really is battling it. He's taken boxing lessons for his balance and his strength. He's still doing work for the ACC network. Really excited to see how Coach Rick has embraced that challenge as he battles through Parkinson's disease and helps to raise money for that, as well as the Crohn's research as Crohn's affects his daughter. And, Kirby told us that there's several Georgia players that deal with facets of Crohn's disease. So this is obviously a very good cause, and the fact that this research is being done at the University of Georgia, even more reason why DawgNation fans have gotten behind Coach Rick in this great cause.
All right, really well said. We'll get back to talking a little ball here, and it's time for Boots on the Ground. So it's a segment where I get to share some of the things I captured with the video camera this weekend at the Mississippi State game. Boy, it's hot down on the field for this game. I'm ready for fall. One of the first things I want to bring you is the second quarter. We saw Trevor Etienne had scored a touchdown, but it got called back for holding on Monroe Freeling. And on the sideline, after Freeling came to the sideline, look who was there. It was Tate Ratledge there to talk him out of it. He was down in the dumps. Georgia had to settle for a field goal, did not get, lost points right there. And who was in his face? Who was in his ear? It's Tate Ratledge telling him, hey, man, it's okay. We can get it together. So a couple things there. First, Freeling getting talked up to by Tate. The other thing, an update on Tate Ratledge, was no longer in a walking boot, just a little brace yesterday. On Saturday, Coach Kirby Smart saying he's running on dry land now, so he's getting closer and closer. That's good news, but also love seeing him take on this role.
No doubt. Got that mullet going strong, and it's important to have Tate on the sideline. This is the sort of leadership that I think Georgia needs more of, and I've identified Carson Beck as someone that needs to have more charisma and rub off on his teammates more. I know Carson is focused. I know that he asserts himself at the line of scrimmage, but your quarterback sets the tone in the building, and this is an area where Carson needs to step up. You can't just say, that's not him, that's not his personality. This is a time for all hands on deck, and if Carson has to come out of his comfort zone a little bit and get vocal and try to encourage teammates, I think that's going to be important. Same thing on defense. Need to see more leadership on defense in the huddle. There's only so much that Kirby and those coaches can do on the sideline. We hear all the time about Georgia being a player-led team, and I think that's lacked in some areas. Again, very good to see Tate at work. Certainly they miss him on the field. He is one of those leaders on the team. I think ETN has emerged as one of those leaders as well. Look, this guy didn't come up here from Florida for the heck of it. He's on a business trip, and he wants the Dogs to win a national championship. I like seeing these tough guys, these leaders assert themselves. Need to see Carson Beck do more of that. And like to see A.J. Allen do that as well. He's a fantastic player from Barnesville. I know he's starting to come into his own, him and Raylan Wilson both. I think both of those young players need to step up big in the second half for the Dogs to go on a title run.
All right, talking about defense, talking about the secondary, I want to take you kind of through a sequence of events also in the second quarter on Saturday. So Mississippi State driving the ball, there's a timeout. Kirby Smart calls Dalen Everett over, and Dalen was part of Boots on the Ground last week, and he says, gives him whatever instructions he's going to give him. And then they go out and run the very next play, and the very next play after this, Mississippi State beats Dalen Everett for a touchdown. He kind of had poor eye discipline, lost track of the receiver, and he scores the touchdown. And then Kirby comes up to him right after and kind of slaps him on the head and says, hey, man, what we just talked about? And that's where you talked about, Mike. Where's the leadership inside the huddle? We got to get that together. It can't just come from the sideline and the coaches, but the secondary continuing to struggle. Here's what Kirby Smart said about the secondary today, and it's not just Dalen Everett.
When you watch the tape, when we played correctly and used the right technique, we played well. We did not win every ball. Jonell Aguero's a great example. He covered the guy exactly like he was supposed to, and the guy made a great throw and a great catch. We're going to take that. We're going to say, you know what? We're not going to win every battle. We're not going to win every 50-50 ball, but we're going to try to win more than we lose. But when you don't cover someone, period, as a coach, you're going, what is wrong here? Like we didn't cover the guy. We had bad eyes. We looked in the backfield. Things that you harp on every day, they happen. That's what offenses do. They try to give you eye candy and try to get you looking at the wrong thing. We have to remove those.
Mike, this secondary, rough. And it's not getting any easier with Steve Sarkisian this week.
No, it won't be. And I kind of wonder what type of coverages Kirby's going to throw out there. The most important thing for any defense is to be able to execute it. And I wonder about the sophistication of the defense and if Kirby needs to dumb it down a little bit so these players aren't thinking as much. We know Dalen Everett is a very capable defensive back, but he's not having the best of years. I don't know if it's a confidence deal or maybe just the pressure of being the top cover corner, but teams are going after him. And number 6 needs to show us why, he's got that veteran status and the trust of Kirby Smart. You saw the way Kirby embraced him, after that play. I mean, that was not a chewing out. That was a counseling session. So I think these guys have been a bit fragile. Don't often associate the word soft with Georgia football, but I think the defense has not been as edgy as it needs to be. There needs to be an attitude adjustment. Again, it needs to come from within. These players have to look themselves in the mirror. And I asked Dan Jackson today, Cody, about being an underdog. And he said, well, I don't ever really consider us an underdog. Well, guess what, Dan? You're an underdog. Georgia is an underdog. People expect the Georgia Bulldogs to go to Texas and lose that football game. And it's going to be up to Georgia to assert themselves and maintain the superiority and the confidence that the nation has in them. There's not many teams that would go to Texas as a mere 3-point underdog. Home field itself is worth 3 points. That's the gamblers telling you they think Georgia's as good as Texas when they play their best football, and they expect the Dogs to play their best football. So it's going to be interesting to see how these young men take on this challenge, go to battle at Texas, knowing what they're up against, perhaps the most explosive offense in the country. I think Kirby said maybe the best overall team in terms of all 3 phases of the game that he's seen in the last few years. So quite a challenge for the Dogs, but one that, it may just be what the doctor ordered for Georgia to be humbled a little bit, to be challenged a little bit, to be put on notice that, no, we don't expect you to win. For the first time, Georgia an underdog since 2021 opener against Clemson. And you saw how Georgia's defense responded in that game.
Yeah, I would love to see another Chris Smith moment in this game. You talk about some competition, too, coming now. Ellis Robinson got great things said about him by Kirby Smart after the game on Saturday. He said he would love to have gotten him in the game much sooner. He's one of those 5-star freshmen we heard so much about from Jeff Sintel. Built him up, built him up, built him up. Well, when this ball goes up, and we showed Dalen Everett, and it's not just him. Daniel Harris had his moments. Julio Humphrey had his moments where they just could not find the football. Then Ellis Robinson comes in late and makes an interception. Granted, he was out of bounds, but he turned around, found the football, made a very athletic play. Maybe he's the answer to that secondary moving forward and can maybe provide that spark or a little competition. Hey, man, I got to push myself. There's somebody coming for my job.
No doubt about it. I think all jobs are open every week at Georgia. I mean, that's one of the things that's made this a great program is there is a lot of depth of talent. You've heard Kirby every year talks about coaching up the bottom of the roster. He's had to do more of that with all the transfers in the NIL and the way they're able to lure some very quality players away that would be quality backups or maybe in the rotation now starting elsewhere. So we're about at that time of year where we see these Dogs mature a little bit. And I think that Ellis Robinson is a good example of that. Now, I don't know who snaps he's going to take away, or maybe we'll see more dime package with 6 defensive backs out there, but certainly that's a very capable playmaker who knows what to do when the ball is in the air, Cody. And speaking of the ball being in the air, I can't help but think that Georgia, having played a few of these night games, is going to be an advantage under the lights at Darrell Royal Stadium. Georgia has played in these night road games before. This is not going to be unfamiliar to them. Certainly the Alabama environment was daunting with over 100,000 people and a lot of hype and game day. And once again, we have game day on hand. And I think Georgia's going to be ready for that. I think that's advantage Georgia that this game is being played under the lights, and there's going to be a lot of hype behind it.
Yeah, really well said there. All right, so if we're going to kind of brought everybody down talking secondary, we got to build everybody back up. We're going to finish boots on the ground on a high note, really cool note. Lawson Luckie catches a touchdown in the second quarter, and we saw his celebration as he was coming through the end zone, kind of does the kiss, right? So who is he kissing to? Well, in the front row is his mom and his brother. So this is who he was blowing a kiss to, and a really great story, if you've not already heard it, about Lawson Luckie and his little brother Cannon, who he spends a ton of time with and loves. He's wheelchair bound. He can't speak or move, but he was one of those folks that Lawson was blowing a kiss to. And this first time he's gotten to score a touchdown with his little brother right there. There you see his mom, Hillary, as well. She was going crazy. So just a fun moment because of the disability with Cannon, they sit on the front row there in the handicap section. So it was a really kind of a fun moment. Now, he was there earlier in the season, and Lawson caught a touchdown earlier in the season, but it was so hot that day that Cannon couldn't stay out in the sun. So this was the first time Cannon got to be right there as big brother scored a touchdown. Kind of a cool moment.
Yeah, some really good work by you, Cody. These segments are so interesting. I don't see them anywhere else, and I think you do a great job spotlighting and catching these stories on the sideline that would be so easy to overlook otherwise. And you're right. There's a lot to a story like this. When you wonder what motivates a player, it kind of reminds me of Kirby Smart in junior high, watching his older brother go through a battle with cancer at the time, and how that motivated him to grow into one of the best high school players in the state and land that last scholarship on a Ray Goff team. You just never know what's going to move these players and push them to greatness. Certainly Lawson Luckie on his way there. That's a great family story. Georgia needs more of that. You hear Kirby talking about players and their whys and how they exchange time in budget time to get to know one another. I think it's harder and harder to do with the portal and transfers coming in. But again, I sense this Georgia team is very close-knit. I think they're going to be playing for each other as well as themselves at Texas.
Yeah, and they're a great story on DawgNation.com. Just search for it. Jeff Sintel telling that whole story about Cannon if you want more details on Lawson Luckie's why. All right, that's Boots on the Ground. Let's go from Mike's 30,000-foot view. Boy, it was some fun football on Saturday night. Georgia got to play early. We got to get home and watch some craziness, whether it was happening in Death Valley or out in Oregon as well. It was a great weekend of football.
Let's start with the Oregon-Ohio State game because I thought those two teams played the highest level game of the night, the day, the weekend, the year. So impressed with Dan Lanning and what he's done. You want to talk a guy that's up to his neck in intensity and in it with his team. Dan is where he has the Oregon Ducks where Kirby needs to get the Bulldogs. That was a tremendous performance by the Ducks at home at Autzen Stadium, one of the most intimidating environments in college football. Very impressed with Dylan Gabriel, the way he was able to put that team on his shoulders when need be, and Dan's coaching down the stretch against what's probably the most talented roster in college football, the Buckeyes. Very impressive strategy for Dan. It's a long season. I actually have the Ducks #1 on my ballot and Texas #2. So we'll start there. Very impressive for Dan, and Oregon is now, they lead the Big Ten. There's still a lot of season left, but I've got them penciled into the playoff right now. I've got the Buckeyes #3 with a loss. I don't care they got a loss. That is one heck of a football team. That's a long road trip, very difficult environment. So we saw, I think, two of the top 5 teams that you're going to see in the seeding for the college football playoff. Bringing it back home, the Longhorns, and I watched that game against Oklahoma as well. I was watching it intently. Ewers came out slow. The Oklahoma defense was very capable. Now, I will say this. The Longhorns did not allow Oklahoma past midfield again until there was less than 2 minutes left in the game. Oklahoma kicked an early field goal off of that Quinn Ewers interception, did not cross midfield again until there was 2 minutes left. So Texas flexing some muscle in the trenches in that particular game.
Yeah, I mean, the Oklahoma game to me, kind of, I think of Georgia, Florida. It's like Georgia beating Florida. It's impressive, right? It's a rivalry game. It's never easy, but it's also not quite the Florida or the Oklahoma that we've seen in the past. And they didn't have any wide receivers.
No, they lack firepower. They've had a lot of injuries at center and wide receiver. I'm glad you brought up Florida, though. Let me tell you, the Gators were knocking the stuffing out of Tennessee. Tennessee didn't score in that game at home with Neyland Stadium checkered until the third quarter. Some unfortunate luck for the Gators in the red zone, some red zone trips where they weren't able to get in the end zone. They really outplayed Tennessee most of the night. Makes me wonder a little bit about Jacksonville and what Florida could be capable of. Now, their quarterback, Graham Mertz, was injured in that game. I haven't heard an update on his status quite yet, but it looks serious enough to me that he may not play this week. Their running back also injured in that game. Gators took some hits. Can Billy Napier keep that team together? I think his job's going to depend on it. As for Tennessee, the Volunteers with another big challenge this week, Cody. Alabama comes to Knoxville third Saturday in October. Which Alabama will they get? Will they get the one that Georgia saw in the first half or the second half? Will they get the one that led South Carolina 14-0 or the one that squandered and gave up 12 points in the final minute and a half of the first half in Tuscaloosa and what turned into a major shootout? So I will be watching that game as well, doing a little scoreboard watching between Alabama and Tennessee. I think the loser of that game is not going to make the playoff. There's a hot take for you. And I know that Tennessee only has one loss and Alabama only has one loss, but I think that is a loser out game. Very important game right there. And then we mentioned Florida a second ago. I believe Brock Vandergrift and the Wildcats may be traveling down there to Gainesville this week. Kentucky, disappointing home loss to Vanderbilt. This Vanderbilt thing, it was cute and it was fun when we were calling them Cinderella, but I'm starting to wonder if there's a little substance. Maybe we ought to put Del McGee in for Coach of the Year since Georgia State was able to beat Vandy. But Vandy has certainly turned it around. They're playing good football. I will stay tuned to the Vanderbilt Commodores as well. Never thought I'd say that it's a good thing Georgia's not playing Vandy, but the way that quarterback's playing right now, he's giving the Commodores some hope and making Clark Lee the early favorite for SEC Coach of the Year.
All right, one update. Yeah, Graham Mertz, they did announce a ACL. He's done for the year, done for his college career. So hate to see that for Graham Mertz in Florida, even though they are, as Brandon Adams likes to call them, the lousy, stinking Gators. Like you said, Georgia, probably lucky they're not playing South Carolina and Vanderbilt. Alabama used to just dog on. They get to play in the East. They don't have to play anybody. Not so easy, is it, Bama?
Yeah, great point, Cody. How many times did we hear that? So many people trying to take credit away from the Dogs for their 3 straight undefeated regular seasons, something that Nick Saban and Steve Spurrier never accomplished with an 8-game schedule. And you're finding out that these SEC teams do have a bit of fight. Impressed by Shane Beamer. I think he's done a great job. I'll tell you another game I'm going to be looking at. You got to look at Arkansas and Sam Pittman. And, Sam and Arkansas, they were able to get that very impressive win over Tennessee. And now they've got some momentum. I'll be staying tuned to what Bobby Petrino and the Arkansas Razorbacks can do. I'm not ready to count them out quite yet. I know they had an early loss. I know they've got another challenge on their hands this week, but I really like Arkansas a lot, enough that I'm going to pick them to upset LSU this week. LSU with the Magnolia Bowl victory over Lane Kiffin. Speaking of which, Kiffin now with 2 losses, the Rebels with a bye week to try to put things together. They're 1 loss away from being knocked out. And how about that impressive Mississippi State team? They played Texas close. They played Georgia close. They get to come home and play maybe the hottest team in the league, Texas A&M, a team that I have picked to beat Texas in the final game in the regular season. I'll be interested to see if the Maroon Bulldogs can make a game out of that and take a bite out of the Aggies.
I think there was worry in the offseason that the 12-team playoff is going to devalue the regular season. This regular season has been so great, and thanks to teams like Arkansas and Vanderbilt for making it so much more fun and so much less predictable than it's been over the last couple of years. And Ole Miss is going to be their Super Bowl when they play Georgia now. They're hosting Georgia. They've already probably eliminated, but they definitely can't lose again. That's going to be their big one. They're going to be, unless Kiffin loses the team of transfers, that's the other, thing to think about with that team. But it's going to be a big one for them this week.
You wonder about the culture when you have that many transfers. I believe all but 4 or 5 starters on the Ole Miss team are transfers. And another really cool game that I'm going to be scoreboard watching is Hugh Freeze and the Auburn Tigers are going to be at Missouri in a noon game. I think Hugh Freeze could be coaching for his job, and Eli Drinkwitz, he has to win this game. They kind of had a bit of a gimme last week up there at UMass. I'm sure they did some sightseeing in New England before they put a pounding on the Minutemen. Good news for Georgia is they'll see that weak team later this season in November. But Auburn at Missouri is an intriguing game. Missouri only a 6-point favorite. kind of thinking that the Auburn Tigers, might pull the upset over the Missouri Tigers. So let's stay tuned to that battle in Columbia in the noon kickoff while you're getting warmed up, cooking out on the back porch, having your beverages, getting ready for the big Georgia-Texas game. Keep an eye on that Auburn-Missouri game. That should be entertaining.
You think Hugh Freeze is coaching for his job at this point already?
I do, and I think it has a lot to do with the fact that, number one, he brought in a lot of baggage. I think there were some people that weren't entirely behind that hire. And number two, some of the comments that he made earlier this year, and we talked about that earlier on the Beat segment, when he kind of threw his quarterback under the bus and then backed the bus up and ran over him the next week again. I think Hugh's in danger of losing the locker room. And if you lose your team, it's over. So I think this is a game that Auburn needs to win to try to generate some momentum, to show some progress. I didn't think Auburn played that terrible in the game at Georgia. I think Georgia just played, a bit better. That was a pretty clean game. So don't be surprised if you see an upset there in Columbia, Missouri.
All right, good stuff, Mike. This is 10 for one more break. On the other side, we will have our Anytime Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing Who's Hot and Who's Cold segment. But this is On the Beat from DawgNation.
I'm so glad you're here.
Let's take a look.
Anytime can handle all your HVAC and plumbing needs, providing top quality service for a reasonable price.
All fixed now.
Can we call you again?
Yes, anytime. Any day? Yes, anytime.
But for the heat?
Yes, anytime. For the toilet? Yes, anytime. Anytime you have a problem, just call.
Anytime Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing. Large enough to handle your HVAC needs, but small enough to care.
All right, we are back for our Anytime Heating and Cooling and Plumbing. Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing. Who's hot and who's cold? Mike, tell me who's hot this week.
Texas Longhorns, really hot when they stomp out a rival like that. That's typically a close game. The Longhorns bring a lot of momentum into this affair Saturday night. I'm really looking forward to seeing if Georgia can stop the Longhorns. Sometimes I think when a team plays that well, it's hard to carry that over into the next game. A lot of celebrating there. The golden hat. Kings of the Southwest once again. Not so fast, Texas. There's a good opponent coming in, but right now you got to tip your hat to the Texas Longhorns. Vanderbilt, they get to come home to Nashville. And Cody, there might actually be more Vanderbilt fans there than the opposition has this week because they're playing a lousy Ball State team. So a big win coming up for the Commodores. Just got to keep their quarterback healthy, but you got to tip your cap to the Commodores. The win over Kentucky, very impressive on the road. We know how tough it can be to play there. So Vanderbilt and Texas, two very hot football teams in the SEC.
And brand new goalpost in Nashville for this game coming up this week. Hot on the Georgia team. We started off the whole show talking about it. Carson Beck has been red hot. We'll see if he can keep it up and get that first kind of signature win that we haven't seen him have so far in his Georgia career. We'll see if he can pull it off in a hostile environment on Saturday night in Austin, Texas. All right, that's who's hot. Who's cold this week, Mike?
National media had some really poor takes on Georgia, trying to compare them to the Urban Meyer area after Colby Young's unfortunate domestic issue that led to his suspension. Georgia football's culture is nothing like the Florida Gators under Urban Meyer. It's poor journalism. It's sensationalism in headlines, and I'm disappointed. As you know, I make an SEC Network appearance every week with Paul Feinbaum, and I didn't have any problem explaining that to their audience. Also think it's a cold take for anyone to insinuate that Kirby Smart would intentionally push or shove a player from another team. Kirby Smart is a sportsman. He understands how to represent Georgia. He's a very intense coach. That sideline is pandemonium. That it's hard for coaches to maintain focus on the field and also try to operate. He was running down to Glenn Schumann to try to get an adjustment off a poor play call. Very cold takes by people or anyone that thinks that Kirby Smart would intentionally shove a player from another team.
Yeah, good for you. I watched the Feinbaum appearance. You did stand up for the Georgia program and the Georgia culture as well. And then Kirby, in the post-game press conference, I think he legit did not know what we were talking about. And so he went back and he said he today watched it right after that press conference and said, oh, so he called Jeff Lebby. He has talked to Michael Van Buren as well and smoothed things over and said everything is cool there. But yeah, I think totally, if you watch where his eyes were, he didn't even know who that was on the sideline. Not something to worry about. We talked about who's cold. The secondary's got to heat up this week. We'll see if an infusion of Ellis Robinson can do something. Maybe get a takeaway or two from Quinn Ewers, see if they can get the ball from him. But it's going to be a fun week. How different does this week feel from the Alabama week, or how similar does this week feel, Mike, leading up to this big game for Georgia?
Feels different. I feel like there was an expectation for Georgia to beat Alabama. It was almost going to be impossible to live up to all the hype and expectation. And obviously, the way the game broke out, and you got to give Jalen Milroe credit. He played a tremendous first half. This is different. Quinn Ewers is not going to be able to do to Georgia with his feet what Jalen Milroe did. I think Georgia's going to go in very prepared. Kirby Smart gave the Georgia crowd a lot of credit for pumping those dogs up at the start of the Mississippi State game and really breaking out of what he said was a bit of a lethargic pregame routine. I think now that Georgia has caught that fast starting bug, you're going to continue to see that. I'd be surprised if Georgia didn't have at least 10 points on the board by the end of the first quarter in Austin.
Love to see that. That's a hot take right there. We'll see if the Dogs can get something going early in that game. Going to be a fun one this week. I know you're heading out. You'll be in Austin. Have you been to that stadium? Nobody, it seems like, has been to a game at Texas before. You've covered a lot of football. Have you covered a game there at Memorial Stadium, DKR?
No, that's been a stadium on my bucket list. I drove by it, and to be honest with you, that was 2007, and I wasn't that impressed. Obviously things have changed. They've got the Jumbotron. I think they call it the Godzillatron. This replay board is huge. Why bother to watch the game when you've got a giant replay board? And looking forward to seeing this stadium. Looking forward to seeing the stadium setting. How does Austin host a major game like this? It is a major league city. It doesn't have a professional franchise per se, but if you look at the population, it's quite large, known for its arts district and certainly its Texas history. Also, an F1 race will be in town. So there's going to be an international flavor in Austin, Texas. So looking forward to seeing how that town hosts this event and what that game time atmosphere is like. The SEC is a little bit different. And yes, I know the Red River Shootout is now an SEC game, but it's not a real SEC game. They're going to get the best of the best when the Dogs roll into town. We'll see if Texas is ready for what Kirby Smart and Georgia has in store.
One thing for sure, it will be a Dog Nation invasion as we have our folks all getting together. We'll be tailgating before the game, and Mike, who's always a man of the people, will be out getting with all you Dog Nation fans. I know it's something that he really loves. All right, that's going to do it for On the Beat this week. Huge game. We'll have you covered all week long right here